So I started working at this club, and you had to take a drug test in order to work there. And the drug testing place was like an hour away by bus. And I didn't have a car and I didn't have a driver's license. I just never really got my driver's license. And so I, and it was a shift. The job was at a shift. It was a third shift, or excuse me, it was second shift. And so I didn't have time to like go out there while they were open and get back in time for my shift and that sort of thing. So they had let me begin without having taken a drug test, but that I had to get it. And so it was actually on September 10th, 2001, that was like I had to get it. Like I wasn't going to be able to come into work that day unless I got the thing. They like said you put it off long enough, just do it and get here on time. So I was like, okay. So I go out, and it turns out that the place is out by the airport. And so after I took my test, I was waiting for the bus and ended up having to wait like 45 minutes and was just sort of standing out there on the road waiting. And on September 10th, it was a really beautiful day where I lived. It was just as beautiful where I lived as it was in New York on September 11th. And September 10th was the same weather. It was just this beautiful blue sky and just, I mean, the sun was warm and it was just perfect. Perfect, perfect, perfect weather. I mean, if you're sensitive to weather and you like weather, you remember that day on that level. And so September 10th, just as beautiful. And I'm watching these planes kind of fly through this blue sky. And I'm just watching them. And then I start thinking, I'm glad there hasn't been any hostage situations in a while. That'd be really scary to be in an airplane and have it hijacked. Like, oh, God, I hope that never happens to me. That'd just it'd be horrible. I'm glad that hasn't happened that much anymore. So that was my thought. And then I got on the bus and got back to the club, which was, they were twin towers. And this club was on the top floor of the tallest of the two towers. And it was, they weren't, I think the tallest was 19 floors. So it wasn't like the World Trade Center tall by any means, but it was the tallest building in this particular city. So that's where I worked, was at the top of the tallest building in the city, and of a twin tower. And so I'm walking in, and I kind of stop, and I'd been feeling around that time, I'd really been experiencing a lot of depression. I hated working the second shift and started going to a bar after work every night and just feeling, God, like just I need something to feel good about. I need to have an up moment because I just felt so down. So I was drinking a lot, trying to create that, and that wasn't really working. That, like, it worked maybe for the first 10 days of the job, but then after that it was like, this isn't what I want to be doing. This, God, we're, waiting on people, waiting on these people. That's not what I want to be doing. And just having a lot of anxiety about relationships, and my childhood was coming up and I wasn't ready to look at it, and just not in a good place. And so, I was like, okay, I'm going into work. And I kind of stopped and I looked up at the buildings and just sort of admired their architecture. And I was like, oh, I wonder who came up with the Twin Tower concept. And at this time, like, I didn't even know that the World Trade Center was two buildings. Like, I knew that there was a World Trade Center in New York, but I just thought it was some tall building where a lot of business happened. I didn't know it was Twin Towers. I just never really paid much attention to New York's skyline to know that, oh, and I'd never been there, so it was just kind of like, you know, New York has a famous skyline, but I didn't know what the buildings look like, you know. So when I was walking in, I just kind of looked up and admired the architecture and how they looked against the sky. You know, that sort of that shot that we've seen so many times of like standing on the ground nearby the World Trade Center looking up with the plane going in. And it just kind of had that feel. So I looked up and I admired it and I went back in. Go up to work, and about 6 o'clock that night, I walk into the main dining room, which faces a nearby city that does have a large skyline, and we're right across the river from it. And so there's this huge city skyline, and all the servers and everybody are at the window looking out. And so I walk over, and across the city is this huge black cloud of smoke just billowing up, you know, and I was like, what happened? And they're like, we don't know. I'm like, wow, you know, it's really weird. Like, we are so isolated up here. A major, you know, world catastrophe could happen and we would have no idea what happened. And they're like, God, that's depressing. And I was like, you know, being a Debbie Downer, but it just struck me like how scary that would be and just how vulnerable that felt to kind of be up and away from the earth and not grounded, not safe, not connected, not in the know.
Let's cut out the melodrama so we can wake up the whole wide world. Let's make up and start all over and awaken the boys and the girls.